It was a quiet morning in the dense forest, the kind of silence where every rustle of leaves felt like a secret waiting to be revealed. Dr. Emily Carter, a dedicated wildlife veterinarian, was on her usual patrol when something unusual caught her attention. Out of the shadows emerged a massive gorilla, her belly swollen with pregnancy, her steps heavy, and her eyes filled with an almost human desperation. Emily froze, sensing something extraordinary was about to unfold. But how could a wild gorilla, known for keeping distance from humans, willingly approach a stranger? And what would drive such a powerful creature to risk everything by seeking out help from a human? The answer was hidden in the trembling hands of the gorilla, in her labored breathing, in the silent plea radiating from her gaze. This was not a confrontation. It was a cry for mercy, a fragile bridge of trust between species. Emily felt her heart race as the gorilla inched closer, each step both hesitant and brave. She lowered herself slowly, avoiding sudden movements, whispering gentle words though she knew they would mean nothing to the animal. Still, the gorilla seemed to understand tone, if not language, pausing, listening, as if weighing whether this fragile human could be her salvation. For a brief moment the forest itself seemed to hold its breath. Birds stopped singing, and even the wind died down as if nature itself wanted to witness this silent meeting. Emily's eyes locked onto the gorilla's, and for the first time in her career, she felt the line between human and animal blur completely. This wasn't science. This was pure connection. The gorilla lowered herself onto the ground, her massive body trembling. Emily could see the pain etched into every movement, the strain of carrying life while fighting for her own strength. She noticed shallow cuts along the gorilla's arms, perhaps from pushing through thorny branches in her desperate search for help. This wasn't chance. The gorilla had chosen her. Emily's training told her to keep a safe distance, to wait for backup, but her instincts screamed otherwise. This was no ordinary patient, and time was running short. If she hesitated, both mother and child could be lost. Her hands trembled, not from fear of the animal, but from the weight of responsibility suddenly placed upon her. Kneeling just a few feet away, Emily carefully extended her hand, not to touch, but to show presence, calm, and intention. The gorilla's eyes followed the gesture, and then, in an almost impossible act of trust, she shifted her body, exposing her vulnerable side as if to say, "Help me." Emily's throat tightened, realizing this was not just an animal seeking aid. This was a mother begging for her child's chance at life. In that moment, Emily knew her path was set. Whatever happened next, she could not walk away. The fate of both the gorilla and her unborn baby now rested entirely in her hands, and she silently vowed to fight for them with every ounce of skill and courage she possessed. Emily's pulse pounded as she knelt in the dirt, staring into the gorilla's pleading eyes. Every lesson she had ever learned told her that wild animals, especially ones in pain, could be unpredictable and dangerous. Yet here was this great mother, trembling, vulnerable, asking for help. The weight of the decision pressed on her chest, heavier than the humid air that clung to the forest. She knew she could call for backup. Reinforcements, stronger hands, equipment, everything she would normally rely on was just a radio call away, but time was not her ally. The gorilla's labored breathing grew harsher, her hands gripping the earth as if clinging to life itself. Emily understood that every minute she waited could steal away the chance of saving both mother and child. Her fingers brushed against the radio at her belt, but she froze. If she stepped back now, if she chose safety over courage, she might return only to find lifeless bodies where hope had once stood. The thought pierced her heart like a blade. She whispered to herself, "She came to me. I can't turn away." The gorilla shifted slightly, groaning in pain, and Emily could see the powerful muscles trembling under the strain. Her instincts screamed to act. Years of training rushed through her mind, procedures, risks, outcomes, but none of it seemed enough for this moment. She wasn't in a clinic. She was in the middle of the forest, with nothing but her own resolve. Emily steadied her breathing, forcing calm into her voice as she whispered soft, soothing tones. Though the gorilla could not understand her words, the rhythm carried meaning. The animal's breathing slowed just enough for Emily to recognize it as trust. It wasn't perfect, but it was all she needed. Her hands reached into the small medical bag she carried, fingers trembling as she searched for the limited tools she had. Sterile cloths, a scalpel, some antibiotics, basic equipment, nothing close to what this situation demanded. Still, it was more than nothing. She laid the items out carefully, making sure every movement was visible to the gorilla, as though showing she meant no harm. The forest pressed closer around them, the stillness broken only by the ragged breaths of the gorilla. Emily's mind replayed every outcome. If she misstepped, she could be mauled. If she delayed, 2 lives could be lost. There was no safe choice, only the choice to act. Courage, she realized, was not about the absence of fear, but the willingness to move through it. Emily placed her hand over her chest, whispered a silent promise, and inched closer to the gorilla's massive frame. She could feel the heat radiating from the animal's body, the raw power restrained by pain and desperation. Her decision was made. She would not wait. She would fight for this life with every ounce of strength she had. Emily's knees sank deeper into the damp soil as she edged closer to the gorilla's side. The air was thick with tension, and the forest seemed frozen, every leaf and branch holding its place, as if waiting for the outcome of this fragile moment. The gorilla shifted, groaning with a sound so raw that it pierced straight into Emily's chest. She had seen suffering before, but never this close, never from a creature so powerful, yet so vulnerable. Her hands shook as she prepared the few supplies she had, laying out clean claws and a small scalpel. She had no proper equipment for delivery, no sterile table, only the forest floor beneath her. Yet she forced herself to focus, drawing on her training, reminding herself that knowledge mattered more than tools. She had to adapt, had to improvise, because waiting was not an option. The gorilla's breathing quickened, her massive chest rising and falling in jagged rhythms. Emily leaned forward, speaking softly, her voice steady, though her heart raced. "It's okay, girl. I'm here. We'll get through this." The words were for herself as much as for the gorilla. She placed her hands gently against the swollen belly, feeling the movement of life within. It was faint, but there, a fragile spark she refused to let slip away. The mother groaned again, clutching at the ground with powerful hands, her body trembling under the strain. Emily wiped sweat from her brow and prepared for what was coming. She recognized the signs. The baby was ready, but complications loomed. This wasn't going to be easy. She guided the mother with calm gestures, urging her to push, her own voice breaking into short whispers of encouragement. Minutes stretched like hours, each contraction a battle. Emily's hands moved with precision, steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. She used the claws to clean away blood and fluid, making sure the path remained clear. The gorilla's cries grew louder, echoing through the forest like thunder, a sound of pain and defiance mixed into one. Then, with one final effort, there was movement, sudden, fragile, breathtaking. Emily leaned in, her hands ready, and caught sight of the tiny form struggling into the world. Her heart leapt. The baby was coming, but it was weak, smaller than she had expected, its first breaths hesitant. She acted quickly, clearing the airway with practiced hands, urging the tiny chest to rise. For a terrifying moment, silence lingered. The mother lay exhausted, her body trembling, her eyes fixed on Emily with desperate hope. Emily pressed gently against the newborn's chest, whispering frantic encouragement, praying for life. Then a faint cry pierced the stillness, weak but undeniable, the sound of survival pushing through impossible odds. Emily's throat tightened as she lifted the tiny gorilla for the mother to see. The exhausted giant shifted, her eyes filling with something that needed no translation. Against every challenge, life had prevailed. Emily placed the newborn into the waiting arms of its mother, and the bond that followed was a force stronger than words. The newborn's cry grew stronger, each fragile sound echoing like a promise of survival. Emily's chest ached with relief as she watched the tiny body squirm against her hands, warm and alive. She guided the baby carefully into its mother's massive arms, her breath caught between fear and awe as the gorilla cradled the fragile life with surprising gentleness. The mother's eyes softened, and she pulled the infant close, pressing it against her chest. Emily's heart raced as she witnessed the first moments of connection, the raw instinct of motherhood breaking through exhaustion and pain. The gorilla's breathing slowed, her strength returning in fragments, powered by the presence of the new life she now held. Emily sat back slightly, her body trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline. She had done everything she could, yet it was the mother's resilience that carried them both through the storm. Watching the gorilla's arms tighten protectively around her child, she felt tears sting her eyes. This was a bond stronger than fear, stronger than pain. The baby shifted, letting out another weak cry, and immediately the mother soothed it with a soft rumble deep in her chest. Emily realized she was witnessing something most people could never imagine, a silent promise between two beings, one that spoke of survival, of hope, of an unbreakable bond that had been forged through struggle. The forest around them seemed to awaken again, the silence breaking as birds began to sing softly above. The air felt lighter, as though the weight that pressed against the earth had finally lifted. Emily let out a shaky breath, her hands still stained, but her spirit filled with something close to wonder. She had been part of something greater than herself. The gorilla lifted her gaze toward Emily, and for a fleeting moment, their eyes met. Gratitude shimmered there, raw and undeniable, not in words, but in presence. Emily felt the connection settle deep within her, a reminder that trust could bridge even the widest gaps between species. The newborn nestled closer, its small fingers curling into the thick fur of its mother. Emily smiled faintly, her body aching, yet her heart swelling with pride. She had fought against the odds, but the true miracle lay in the bond now before her, a bond no human hand could ever replicate. Emily remained nearby, not moving too quickly, giving the mother space to rest while still staying close enough to help if needed. But as the baby let out a stronger, healthier cry and the gorilla nuzzled it close, Emily knew the hardest part was over. Against all expectations, life had triumphed in the heart of the forest. Dr. Emily stood near the enclosure, watching the gorilla cradle her newborn with tender care. The morning sun painted golden streaks across the leaves, and for a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. The staff gathered quietly, moved by the sight of mother and child, and the air was filled with an unspoken reverence that words could never capture. The gorilla's dark, intelligent eyes lifted and locked onto Emily's. There was no fear, no distance, only recognition. It was as though the animal understood that without this woman's courage and kindness, her child might not have survived. Emily felt a warmth spread through her chest, a connection that went far beyond science or medicine. The baby nestled against its mother's chest, small fingers gripping tightly at her fur, making tiny sounds that melted the hearts of everyone watching. The gorilla's embrace was strong but gentle, protective yet filled with tenderness, reminding Emily of the universal instinct shared by every mother to shield her child from harm. Emily knelt down, her hands pressed softly against a barrier, tears welling in her eyes. She whispered softly, not expecting the gorilla to understand the words, but hoping the feeling would reach her. "You're strong, and so is your baby. Thank you for trusting me." In that instant, silence fell, and it seemed as if the two mothers shared the same heartbeat. The keepers, who had witnessed many births before, stood still in awe. What unfolded before them was not only the survival of a newborn, but a silent testimony to trust and compassion. They exchanged glances, humbled by the raw display of nature's strength, and by the courage of the woman who had dared to answer a call most would have feared. Later, Emily walked through the sanctuary's path, her mind heavy with emotions. She thought about the moment the gorilla had reached out to her, pleading without words, and how that plea had awakened something deeper inside her. It was not just about saving a life, it was about honoring the invisible threads that connect all living beings. That night, as the sanctuary lights dimmed, Emily wrote in her journal. Her hands trembled as she tried to capture the day's events. Yet no words seemed enough. Still, she wrote of courage, of trust, of the silent strength of mothers, human and animal alike, and of how a single act of compassion could turn fear into something miraculous. And so the story of Emily and the gorilla was passed among those who had seen it, a reminder that the power of empathy can bridge even the widest of distances. The final lesson lingered in every heart. True strength is not measured by force, but by the willingness to protect, nurture, and love even when fear is at its greatest. If you were moved by Emily's courage and the incredible bond between this gorilla mother and her newborn, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss more amazing wildlife stories like this one.